Hi, my name's Brian. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for asking me to speak, Andy. Like Andy just mentioned, he had been texting the wrong number. I hadn't seen him in a while, and I hadn't been to a meeting here in about a year. You know, I live up in Holly Springs now. And I just so happened to show up, and he was like, "You get my text?" I was like, "No." He's like, "What did you want to text me about?" Well, I wanted you to speak. So it's been a while since I spoke, and it's not my favorite thing to do, so I was a little hesitant. But with that kind of coincidence, you got to kind of say, you know what, I'm gonna take a hint and agree to carry the message. That's what it's all about. So thanks for having me. A little bit of background. My sobriety date is May 11th, 2012. So I've been doing it for a little while now, and you know, this program has changed my life, and you know, it's going to become, I guess, clear throughout the course of this talk about how that's happened. But let me kind of just start from the beginning. You know, tell you what happened, how it was, what happened, and what it's like today. So, my childhood was pretty good. You know, I came from a pretty good family. I have nothing to complain about. You know, so pretty typical in that regard. But all the same, those kind of alcoholic thoughts and behaviors, I guess, started at a young age for me. I think I remember, you know, always feeling a little different, or at least I felt different than the way I thought other people felt, you know. So early on in high school, I started drinking. Really, I guess before that, I started, you know, I think the first drink I had, I was probably 12 or so, 11 or 12. And once I got to high school, though, I just kind of was, you know, early on, that was all I wanted to do anymore, you know, was drink. And, you know, it got into a lot of trouble in high school, and definitely got into some of the consequences from drinking, you know, getting in trouble, getting arrested and stuff like that. And, you know, with this guy and a couple guys here, you know, went through some of the same stuff. But, you know, to be honest, I really kind of, at that point, wasn't really an alcoholic. I was just kind of drinking, you know, I was just a regular drinker, nothing too crazy. There were some mild consequences, but the alcoholic drinking really hadn't started yet. And I kind of got on a more level track after a while coming out of high school, and was really into music, you know. So I think for a long time in my, you know, late teens and early 20s, I had kind of music and to keep me kind of level set, to keep me stabilized, you know, because I had a group of guys around me that were a little bit more level-headed than I was, and so they could focus me and help me. And with the, you know, bands and stuff, you're going to be drinking, you're going to be partying, but what I didn't really, never really kind of thought about was I was, you know, typically always the guy who'd be drinking when the sun came up, you know, me and a couple other buddies. That wasn't really normal, you know. The other guys I was hanging out with weren't doing that. So I had some kind of alcoholic tendencies at that point, and just kind of kept going. Once that kind of cushion, you know, the music stopped, I kind of got away from that, the bands broke up, you know, I just kind of went, all I had left at that point was the drinking, right? So it was about my mid-20s, I really started going hard, and just got into a lot of trouble. Consequences started piling up, you know, getting arrested, you know, going to jail, all sorts of stuff like that, losing places to live. You know. I think really the first time I went to treatment, I was in my late 20s. I went to like a 28-day program because I had had an intervention from, you know, my family. My girlfriend actually organized it. My brother came, and he was really upset, you know. He started just like blubbering and crying, and I was just like, all right, fine, I'll go, you know. it's hard to watch somebody do that and go through that and then not agree to their demands. So I went, but I really didn't understand AA at that point. I went to meetings while I was there, and I saw the whole thing, and I had a fundamental problem with AA because I was an agnostic at the time. I couldn't get past this, I was like, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. I agree to that, that much I know. But that step 2 that you get to is what kind of always hung me up. I couldn't really wrap my head around it, couldn't get behind it, and it was very problematic for me for a long time. So, needless to say, that was, kind of a waste of time for everybody, including myself. It wasn't really a waste of time, that's not true, because it did plant the seed. It did plant the seed. I knew about AA after that. I just didn't think it was for me. I thought it was, that was back then. I was like, I'm not into God. I don't believe in God. I was like, it's a cult, so I'm not doing it. Whatever, that kind of thing. So that kind of negative outlook, contempt prior to investigation, that sort of thing. So but I did plant the seed, and I knew it was out there. What I really needed was more consequences in my life, to occur before I could be ready to do the things that you have to do in this program, So it takes what it takes. So I kept going and started having some real problems, and I think it was like in 2009 is when it kind of started to get real bad for me. There wasn't really much more to my life other than drinking. Finding ways to get drunk, finding ways to get alcohol, that's pretty much all I was, doing. Everything else was just kind of extra to that. So it didn't take long when I was in that state for me to start to experience the full brunt of the alcoholism and really kind of understand that I was an alcoholic. At that point, though, I just really didn't care. I was an alcoholic, but I was like, I'm an alcoholic, but I don't want to stop drinking, So, like I said, I started to get into a lot more trouble. I got a lot of legal trouble, kept getting arrested, wrecked a couple cars that year. It was just a very bad year for me. So, I ended up going to a place in High Point, which is called Caring Services. It's kind of like a three-quarters house, a network of three-quarters houses. And I went there because I had been arrested, and I knew that if I didn't go into a long-term treatment program, I was going to go to prison. So I kind of one or the other. So I went up there because, to be honest, I went to that particular city. They gave me like a list of options and detox, and I said, I'll go to that one because I knew I could get alcohol there. I knew I could get what I wanted. So kind of a crazy reason to pick a city to go to treatment, but that's why I went up there. And but something happened while I was there. I really, like I said, at this point I really still didn't have a concept of God that I believed in. I was more or less an agnostic, and I was kind of going through the motions. I was there because I had to be there. But I went to the meetings, and I met a lot of great people, and one of the guys in my house was like, hey, you need to get a sponsor. He's like, okay, fine, I'll get a sponsor. I never had a sponsor, so I got a sponsor. And I asked the guy, he agreed to sponsor me, and he kind of took me through things really slowly so I could understand it, and got me to that point where I became open-minded enough to really kind of say, to take another look at the second step, and he showed me like, look, this is what's happened, and kind of like drew a little bit of connection between some of the blessings I had recently, had in my life, and he was like, even if you don't believe in God, just pray anyway. Just do me a favor, just humor me and pray in the morning to stay sober, and then pray and then thank God for keeping you sober at night. So I started doing that because I just did. I believed in this guy, so I was like, okay, sure. I like what you're saying otherwise, so let me try this. And my life just got better and better and better. And I started adding to my prayers, and eventually came to believe in God, and the fact that I could have my own conception of God was a big part of that. And I did kind of have that was a big turning point for me, where I finally kind of realized that I'd been really closed-minded for a long time, as far as trying to, believing in God or giving it a chance, And when I did start to just give it a chance, I started to experience blessings in my life, so there's a direct correlation to me, so that was really all I needed. The more I prayed, the better my life got. And I went through the first 3 steps at that point, and I felt great, I started feeling really good. Problem was, I only took some of the suggestions I was given. I didn't take them all. So I got to the 3rd step, and I was gung-ho about helping people. But when it came to doing work, like the 4th step, that's kind of when I just kind of, I don't know. I didn't do my 4th step. I got focused on some of the external things, with, some of the blessings when you get your life back, getting a good job, or, getting some of your life back and focusing on that instead of recovery. Very, very common, problem that people in recovery run into. I'm a textbook example of that, putting something before my recovery, So I didn't prioritize, and I didn't ever finish that 4th step. And eventually I stopped going to meetings, and then, stopped talking to my sponsor, stopped praying, and then I relapsed. So I relapsed, and I knew it was my fault because I stopped taking suggestions. But at that point, I had that spiritual connection, so something had changed. It was different relapsing after making that connection for me. I felt ashamed, I felt, whereas in the past I wouldn't have cared about relapsing. This time I felt like, well, how could I experience that connection and really see those blessings and have that gratitude, and then just kind of throw it all away. And it just makes you feel some kind of way for sure. For about 10 months after that, I was out there, and I would think about getting sober again, and I was like, I don't even really know if I deserve to get sober, How it's like I kind of felt like I had just like spit in God's face or something after feeling that way, So, but eventually, I didn't have to think too much about it. I got in trouble again. I had really kind of been wanting to get sober. I did. I wanted it back, but I couldn't stop. I could not stop, and it's crazy. So like the last day of my drinking, I had actually gone back up to High Point to see a friend, and I was trying to get some medication that would help me with the detox. But while I was there, I figured, I might as well dip into some of the better stuff out there as well. So, that was my mindset. It was like, I'm trying to quit. I really want to quit, but you know what? Let me just get that one last one in, And that was the last day I ever drank, and I don't like to break traditions. I know it's different everywhere, and, I'm going to keep it very limited. Drugs are a part of my story. But to understand kind of the desperation of where I was, I got to talk about this a little. So I went up there, I got something, and I overdosed in a bathroom in a gas station, and that was not even the first time that had happened to me. I think I had overdosed like 5 times, and a couple times in bathrooms and gas stations. And this was the last time, thank God. It happened. I went to jail. No one would get me out. I had a $5,000 bond. No one would get me out. And thank God nobody would get me out, because if they had gotten me out, it wouldn't have been over. It never would have stopped. I was grateful when I got arrested. I had the detox in there, which of course is horrible, but I was grateful when it was over. I was like, thank God I'm here. I had had the AA in my life before, And I knew I could start praying. I didn't need anything to start praying. So I started praying, you know, in jail, just the same old prayers I used to say, you know, like, help me stay sober today, help take away my defects of character, you know, help me to be useful to somebody, stuff like that. And I was, you know, of course it's terrible to be in jail, it sucks, but I was pretty content with the fact that I was finally coming out the other side, you know. I wasn't drunk anymore. And I started writing letters. There were 2 addresses that I could remember. One was my parents, wrote them a letter, hey, get me out of here, you know. And also, I'm sorry, because I did, you know, my mindset was a little different, so I was like, look, I've been an asshole, I'm sorry. And the other address I could remember, and this could only be from God, in my opinion, was the address to the halfway houses that I used to live in. So I wrote them a letter to my old counselors, and I said, you know, you guys were right about a lot of things. I should have listened to you. I was wrong. And I really want to get sober again, and that, you know, stuff like that. I think I wrote a 6-page letter to one of the guys, and I just wrote it because I had their address, you know. I expressed my desire to stop drinking, you know. At that point, that's all it takes to be a member of this fellowship again. I didn't know this at the time, but they had a program in Guilford County called the Prodigal Son Program, where they can get you out of jail and put you in treatment. And they read my letter and they said, all right, let's get this guy out of jail. He can go directly into one of our houses again. And that's exactly what happened. And I went directly into a house. They picked me up, took me over there. They went into Guilford County Drug Court, which was a huge blessing in my life. Talk about accountability. Drug court program, keep you accountable. And that was the first year, and I was ready, you know, I was ready to be sober. So I did this stuff. I jumped in full speed, you know. I went to meetings. I went to multiple meetings a day. I went to a meeting every day. I called my sponsor every night, prayed every day in the morning and the night, read my meditations, you know, I was all in, you know, and really grateful to be there, because I could have been in jail for months, you know. And, the other thing about drug court that's great is, you know, if you complete their program, it takes a felony on that felony. They just kind of make it go away. Now, I already had felonies on my record, so I wasn't going to be a non-felon, but that was one less felony, so it was good. But at any rate, I went to the program. Now, I was on probation when all that happened, so I did have to answer for my consequences. And I was down here in Moore County, and old Judge Webb said, you know what, let's send this guy let's do a CRV, confined response to violation. It's a new thing at the time. And so I went to prison for a few months, and I was already a couple months sober at that point, so it really wasn't that bad, you know. I went and stayed sober. I went to meetings. I was very blessed to go to the place I did go, because they had multiple meetings a week, like 3 or 4 meetings a week, something like that. And I got in with the right people. I got a temporary sponsor. I chaired meetings, you know, I did all that stuff. Made the coffee. And it was great, you know. I mean, as great as it could be. I felt content being there. I felt like I was still experiencing blessings in my life. So I got out, and they had held my bed for me, another huge blessing in my life. I went back in, got back in the program, and got with my regular sponsor, and you know, eventually we finished the steps. But, this time I did my 4th step. So my sponsor would tell me, he would say this all the time. He's like, if you don't do your 4th, you're going to drink a 5th. So that's what he would always tell me. I knew that was true, because I had already done that. So didn't want to do that again. I did it, and I just went kind of like, I went all out with it. I probably was went a little overboard. I don't know if you can do that with a 4th step, but it was like 30 pages long and typed, and it was a little ridiculous, but I didn't want to make the same mistake again. I was trying to learn from those mistakes, and went through with my sponsor, read the fourth step with him, and he kept an open seat in his living room. That was for God, and we did our fourth step together, or did the fourth step, the fifth step, and then real quick through the sixth and seventh, which I was, we went through the sixth pretty quickly, but he made me wait a little while to do the seventh, and I was like, come on, man, we've got to do the seventh step. I need some relief. This is terrible, but he wanted me to meditate on it, and I trusted him, his judgment. He was a really good sponsor. So did that, started working on amends and all that stuff, and got to the 10th step, and 10, 11, and 12, and those are just, the steps that keep me sober, 10th step is good for me because it helps me, maintain some humility in my life. I got to say, look, I've made a mistake. I screwed up. I said something really stupid. I'm sorry, I have to tell people I'm sorry, and that's good, because sometimes I'm wrong. In fact, I'm wrong a lot, so quite a bit. So it's a great step. It's like get out of jail free step. And then the 11th, of course, is just about strengthening that bond, and the 12th is about carrying the message. And at that point, once I finished that, I was sponsoring guys and doing service work and chairing meetings, and I think I was somehow I had become the archivist for my district, which I think they kind of voted me into that role as a joke, like hey, this will be good for you, Apparently it's not a job that a lot of people want, so, but it was good for me because it kept me accountable. And I stayed in that house, that 3/4 house, for a year. Then I went to an Oxford house for another year. And this whole time I was doing service work and doing meetings every day. I mean, this was 2 years of this, And that's what I needed just to make the thing stick, And just my whole outlook on things have changed. I mean, trying to practice spiritual principles, implement them in my life, humility, open-mindedness, honesty, patience, tolerance, all those things, being cognizant of them and trying to make them a working part of my life on a day-to-day basis. It's very, as many of you know, I'm sure it's very, very challenging. It's a lot easier when you ask God for help, but, and I still have challenges with it today. I mean, I will for the rest of my life. It's one thing I realize as I get farther and farther in, is that this is, that those last few steps are kind of always a work in progress, and I'm not going to be spiritually fit. Being spiritually fit is not something you get to and then you're done, so, or at least in my case, it's something I have to constantly work at, and sometimes I'm good about it, and sometimes I'm not, and I suffer the consequences when I don't practice that, spiritual fitness. And just today, driving down here from Holly Springs, it was like getting behind some of these cars I got behind. It was just, and test your patience and your tolerance, and it's like, you will be amazed before you're halfway there. That's how I felt. I was in awe, But those are good opportunities for me to have some growth, This goes to show that, we're all human beings. I make mistakes all the time, and I screw things up, and I got to do the 10th step, and I got to pray. So it was. That's what happened. Today, it's good. I wish I don't have as much time as I used to for AA, and it makes me sad, and I suffer the consequences for not being here more. But we go to AA to get our lives back. So my sponsor told me at one point, we get our lives back, and then we have full, abundant lives. And today well, what I did was, about 2 years in, I moved with my girlfriend, and then we, found out I was going to have a baby. So I had to kind of really refocus my life because I didn't have any skills. I was a waiter. I was a pretty good waiter, but I didn't have any other skills. So I had to learn to grow up completely in recovery. I didn't have any idea how to really be an adult in a functioning society. So I had to learn all that really carefully over the course of that 2 years in those houses. Learn how to pay my rent, learn how to hold down a job, learn how to, be accountable, responsible, and all that stuff, and start from the bottom. And, it was tough at first, but once I found out I was going to have a family, I changed something. I went back to school. I worked really hard. I was working full-time, going to school. Eventually, I got through it and got into an internship at an IT company and finished school while I was there. And, my life has gotten there's a lot more I have to do. So I'm back in school again now. I work full-time. I'm in school trying to get another degree. And unfortunately, that relationship with my ex didn't work out, and so a lot of times I'm a single dad, So I'm a single dad in school full-time and working full-time. So I don't have a lot of free time, that's my point. But there are some great meetings in Holly Springs, too. So I go to one where they will actually take all the kids, and there's a room and all the kids can go play while the meeting goes on. And that's really just incredible, that's awesome. It's a hell of a meeting. So I have plenty of opportunity, to go to meetings and all that stuff. So I don't know, I lost my train of thought. Let's see. I guess, going through kind of, I know some of the people here maybe kind of like in the halfway houses around here, Bethesda House and whatnot. And really, that was one of the best times of my life. I'm really grateful for my time there in those houses. It's kind of where I learned to grow up and learn to have a relationship with God. And there's nothing like the place where you get sober, For me anyway, it's been, I don't know what it is about. I think it's just being in that house with all those guys trying to get sober together, all trying to do the same thing, and the bonds you make in that experience. And I don't know. I know Andy and Tim tell me all the time about how great AA that is down here in Southern Pines, and I agree. I think it's great down here. For a town this size, it's pretty incredible. But I feel the same way about High Point, so, and Raleigh. So I guess it just matters where you got sober. And going back to kind of those early days where it was Andy and Tim and I and a couple other guys, and I think about it now, and I think there were 4 or 5 of us, and I think we're all in AA now. It's pretty incredible. And we got one buddy up in New York, and he's sober up there, and another guy in Greensboro, I think. So I'm not sure, but it's all due to this program, the big book and the steps, and finding ways to be of service. That's one thing that I feel really grateful about, is being able to be of service to agree to come down and talk, or you know, the job I have now actually gives me 5 days off just to do volunteer work. So that's really, I get paid to like go be of service. That's incredible, you know. Who would have ever thought I'd see it, you know, something like that in my life? I could have never imagined the blessings that I was going to have early on. I just didn't want to go to jail, you know. I didn't want to be homeless. I didn't want to, you know, suffer consequences. And I didn't come in thinking, you know, this is, you know, this program is going to save my life, but it did, you know. So I'm just really grateful for it. Grateful to be here. Fortunately, I might have to cut it a little short. I kind of running out of stuff to say, so I apologize. But thanks for letting me share.